The Indie Writers Club podcast is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid. Pro Writing Aid has been my go-to tool for revising and refining my writing since my first book. Built by writers for writers, it's more than just a grammar and spell checker. Pro Writing Aid helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. It can even provide on-demand developmental feedback on your entire manuscript with its new manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Get ahead of the competition by heading to prowritingaid.com, sign up for free or use the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.
It's the Indie Writers Club with Cara Clare and James Blatch. A place to relax, chat, learn and vent about life as an independent author. Get episode alerts and links at indiewritersclub.com. Now, here's Cara and James.
Welcome to the Indie Writers Club. I am Cara Clare.
And I'm James Blatch. Hello.
Hello, I'm back.
You are back. You were Tom last week.
I know, yeah. Great feedback on Tom.
Cara with beard. Yes, it was. I mean, I just enjoy talking to him. He's a fountain of Hollywood knowledge, but also just somebody who knows a lot about story. And you do feel when you're a Hollywood scriptwriter, and it's amazing, he said he's probably written 50 stories in his life, 20 of which saw the light of day, 3 of which got made. So he's got a lot of stories that come and go, and they understand in that environment that if something's not quite working at the beginning or not quite right about stuff, it doesn't get very far. So whereas novelists, we tend to just, I write my stuff and I self-publish it and I don't really care what anyone thinks, but that's not really the right way of doing it, is it? Having a bit more criticism around you is not a bad thing. So, and that's what this episode's about today. We're going to look at what I think is one of those things that weirdly happens despite all the balances and checks and money in Hollywood, still makes duff scripts every now and again, which is weird, but it does happen.
Yeah. I have a feeling that most of our feedback on Gladiator 2 is going to be criticism. I have tried to find a few positive things to say.
Yeah.
But
we're going to come on to that. We are going to come on to that discussion in a moment. I do want to welcome to the Indie Writers Club family Pro Writing Aid. They are our new sponsors, so we're very grateful to the team, to Chris and Tom and everyone else at PWA. And we wrote that intro. I wrote that between Tom, myself, and you, and we mean it. We don't just read something out because it's a sponsorship slot. We're happy to be partnered with PWA because it's been an important part of my writing, and it's a tool that constantly evolves and develops, and I'm big fans of it. So it's a very good dovetailing. Oh, I love the word dovetailing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really, really pleased, genuinely, because I think it's something that is an integral part of our writing processes. We both love it. The new features that are coming out and the developments that they're making are awesome. So I think it just feels like a good fit because we can naturally talk about it, and yeah, it's genuine when we are. So, and we've had lots of feedback as well, actually, from people who've been trying the manuscript critique since we talked about it and saying how good it is. Yeah, I'm super happy.
And the beta reader critique, which is the other one, which I haven't used yet, but I'm going to, because I finally got to the end of my rewrite of book 2 in my series. So I am moving into that next phase now, which I really enjoy. And most people hate the editing phase, right? I love it. I don't know why. Just love the editing phase. I find the writing phase difficult, but I love the editing phase.
Hate editing. I hate
Everyone
it.
says that.
I hate it with a passion.
Perhaps I should edit other people's books. I think maybe that is something I could do, because I find it very hard. I think probably 7 years of watching films of the BBFC made it almost impossible for me not to analyse scripts when I see them, particularly films, but also books. And I think all of us as authors probably read a book and think, that sort of works, but there's something missing here, which is sort of feedback that you can give each other. I'll do something for free.
So would you be like a development editor? Is that what you would see yourself doing more?
Yes, I think I'd be story editor. I'd be rubbish on spelling and grammar. No, that's somebody else's. But on story, I think I'm pretty good on that. Oh, by the way, talking of Tom from last week, Tom Donnelly, I am reading his novel and it is gripping. He is surprise, a brilliant novelist in terms of character and story. It's a page turner. I'm a third of the way through it. It's called The Year of the Rabbit. I'm not wild about the title, I have to say, from a thriller point of view, but it's a bit late now. Tom, sorry, he does listen to the podcast. But I love the book. And the cover is another one's interesting. The cover of the book is one I think maybe there's a bit of a blank spot in my mind about what works in America versus the UK. And I think there might be a slightly different aesthetic play there. His cover probably is more of an American cover. But anyway, the book is the characters are living in my head now between reading it.
That is high praise.
Yeah.
That is high praise.
Yeah. They're strong right from the beginning. Which is a really good thing, right? We can talk about this when we get onto our discussion in a moment, is literally every line, particularly at the beginning of your book, needs to state everything, state the motive, state the character. There's no pussyfooting around, particularly in thriller. I think probably all genres. But anyway, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm in the weeds of a book, actually. I've got to upload it on Monday. So in typical Cara Clare style, I've still got 15,000 words to write between now and Monday. And that has coincided with it's my weekend to have my son. So,
and it's the, and it's the UEFA Cup final tonight. So you'll probably spend the evening watching that.
Damn it. Yes, and we've got our Indie Writers Club live Q&A tomorrow for the Patreon people who are on the top 2 tiers, which I'm very excited about, actually. And despite being in the weeds with the book, it will be a nice break. So actually, by the time we put this out, we'll have already done it, won't we? So I'm sure it was wonderful.
Yes, it's tomorrow night. So if you want to be in the one for next month, for June, if you go to indiewritersclub.com/support and subscribe to either the top 2 tiers. So the Patreon's taken off really well. It was a brilliant discussion last time. I've done a lot since then in terms of translation as a result of that call. So I'd be interested in picking that up, and we'll talk probably a little bit about what we're talking about today as well. And we have a lot of new members to our Patreon who we are going to welcome. My co-host, I believe you have a list of our new
I'm going to read the whole list. Okay. I'm going to read the whole list. There are 28 of you, so I'm just going to do everyone's first names. So, well, we haven't read them out since the beginning, so I'm going to read them all, but I'll read them quick. So thank you to Ken, Susan, Annette, William, Louise, Kat, MJ, Reese, Sherry, Graham, Lynn in a spin, Arden, Ben, Sue, Jackie, Siobhan, Connie, another Lynn, Jerry, Lindsay, Kay, Marie, Tony, Karen, Linda, Parik, I think that's how you pronounce it, Parik, and Stephanie. And that's everybody. Thank you very much.
Hey, well done. Lynn in Spain. Should always be to me.
Yeah, she's actually Lynn in a spin in Spain.
She has added Spain. Good. Finally got to Spain. And let's get going. So we gave people homework. I mean, not everyone did the homework, I have to say.
No,
not everyone watched Gladiator 2 in the first season.
Yeah, I feel like people maybe watched it and didn't share their feedback, because sometimes people are nervous to share their feedback. So I'm hoping that people have watched Gladiator and or Slow Horses so they can follow along with our discussion on Friday. But we did have a few people send in comments, and I think we're largely all aligned. So
yes, I think so. I mean, I don't want to have to give out detentions at this stage, but just to say, if we are giving out homework in the future, we are expecting it to be done.
We are. What kind of detention would we be giving them? Like 100 lines? Because I feel like that's just our jobs.
Well, in my day, it was a slippering. That's
slippering.
So you get your bottom smacked, which was
which I don't mean. Moving on.
Can I just say that actually happened to me? That's how old I am, and it seems like the 19th century, doesn't it? That as a schoolboy you bent over a desk and slippered, and it bloody hurt as well. And I went to a state school. This is a state school. Can't remember. I remember I went to 2 schools. I got slippered as a 9-year-old. I went for 1 year to boarding school. My dad was in the Air Force. I was in boarding school for a year and got slippered there. And I remember going in there, and there were a line of like a slipper at one end and a running shoe with spikes, which I'm assuming was a joke, at the other end, and like trainers in between. And we got slippered because we were the youngest in school. And then at Hinchinbrook, it was a slipper. I don't remember there being a choice about it. But it was the tail end of that era where that's what you did. If boys were, I would say just being boys, but were.
I'm very sorry that you had to experience that, James.
Well, it hurt, so I can tell you.
Yes, I'm sure it did.
Cry.
Anyway, moving on to other things that hurt. My experience of watching the Gladiator 2.
Yeah, we watched Gladiator 2 again. That's taking one for the team. So I have a load of feedback on this. I mean, I made notes as I went through, and I tried not to be overly critical, because I came away from the first film thinking that film did not work. That film was such a shame, because Gladiator is one of those great movies of all time. It came out of nowhere, a sword and sandals epic in the 90s. People think, what are you thinking doing that? No one's going to go watch that. And then we all went to watch it, and we all hoped for the moments of hope. We were filled with despair for the moments of despair. We cried at the end, and it did everything it needed to do. And then Gladiator 2 comes along, and I'll be surprised if anybody's emotional level went more or below that line. So why was that? Well, I mean, I tell the notes I made. The big question I think you have to ask yourself all the way through a film is who wants what? And that was a question that was, I think, almost impossible to answer at any point in Gladiator 2. So you had this slightly confused. I worked out midpoint what I think went wrong with the film, but I'll come on to that. So at the beginning, you have a few small things that are irritating, but not big. You've got basically two lead characters. You've got the Pedro Pascal character, who's like a Maximus was at the beginning of Gladiator. He's a Roman leader. He looks like a good guy. He seems to know what he's doing. He's got good leadership skills, but he's carrying out Rome's invasion tactics, just as Maximus did against the Germanians at the beginning of Gladiator. In his case, it's in North Africa. Arrived by sea. A terrific opening scene, which was great to watch. Then they scoop up the prisoners of war, and we know that one of them, who's the other main character, who we've watched, he's married, we don't know his name. We know that his wife is killed on the orders of Pedro Pascal's character, who I think is called Acacius, but not by Acacius, by the way, which I think was a mistake, but one of the mistakes. But she was killed because she was in a firing position above them, and he said, no, take those archers out. So they took those archers out, and that included his wife. And he clocked this. He clocked who the leader of what rabble was, or the Romans were. Here's the beginning of the confusion. He's just this guy. I'm not going to give him his name yet, because we haven't revealed his name. We don't know his name. He's just this guy, and he's defending his homeland, and he sees a Roman general, and the Roman general orders some shooting, which includes his wife dying, and that is the beginning of his motivation, in inverted commas, because I don't think it's a particularly strong motivation. Yeah, his wife was killed in battle, not directly by this guy, but that is all we've got set up for, that he wants his revenge. Now, contrast that with Gladiator. In Gladiator, Commodus murdered his father because his father wanted to appoint Maximus as the next emperor, ordered Maximus to be murdered, raped and murdered his wife, tortured and murdered his son, and strung them up for everyone to see. Maximus didn't care about anything else in the world. He wanted to face Commodus in the eye and bloody kill him. And now that is like the strongest motivation you could possibly imagine. So the two films are not really aligned at this point in terms of motivation. Then there's some small things. So they're going towards Rome, and they throw these gladiators into a very provincial little gladiator school. The baboons. It's that baboon's face. But none of that really made much sense to me, because they're actually prisoners of war owned by the Romans, so they wouldn't have given them over to some private gladiator provincial town at that point. That's not what happened to Maximus. Maximus was scooped up by a privateer, like a travelling circus, effectively, who set up his big top and did stuff. And he ended up in Rome because of how good and strong he was. But here, they just set up the same scene, but with no logical reason for it. And that's when it started to occur to me, this idea that the problem with Gladiator 2 is it was hamstrung by needing to provide the same things as Gladiator did, but without the story. So stuff was shoehorned in there, the same scenes, but not the same story. So that was my feeling after the first third of this book, this film.
I think they did that deliberately. So they could have made the decision that this was going to be a movie that could stand alone in its own right. And I feel like they didn't do that, because right from the beginning, they were reminding you of the first movie. They had the same sort of main theme tune, soundtrack, slightly altered, but they also had a really long opening sequence with kind of flashbacks from the first movie. Even as much as the very first opening image was Paul Thingy's character running his hand through some grain. And Russell Crowe, there's the famous bit in Gladiator where he's running his hand through the wheat in the field. So the whole time they were trying to conjure that feeling of the same movie. So you can't help but compare it. You can't help but keep comparing it to that. And the key thing, like you said, that was the problem is that right from the beginning, I don't really understand what his motivation is. There was no kind of, oh my God, that's horrific. It just it fell completely flat.
It did. It becomes even more confused when we are given the alternate storyline of Acosius, this random general who the other guy, we'll just call him the other guy for now, wants to kill because he ordered his wife's death. He turns out to be, without question, a good guy. He's basically the Maximus character here. So he's the general in Rome, but he's married to Lucilla, who Maximus loved, and we know is Lucius's father, the little boy who Maximus basically died for at the end of the first film. So he's a good guy. So now that only goes to weaken the motivation in our eyes as a viewer. We don't really want to do it. I don't know whether we want him to get there and kill him or we don't want him to get there and kill him. And that's one of the feelings of confusion about the beginning of this film. But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it comes a little bit later.
It's not. And I just want to take a second to say there were also some really wild historical inaccuracies, like you mentioned with the how realistic it was that they would stop off and fight a bunch of baboons in a random place. There were some parts that would just absolutely wouldn't have happened, weren't realistic, and it felt completely pointless, which detracted from it. And I wasn't even actually that sure that, is it Paul Mescal? Yeah, his character was going there to try and kill Acasius. I wasn't actually that sure on his motivation because he doesn't really say much for the first third of the movie.
There's a point where he says, when he's been scooped up off the ground, as a prisoner of war, there's a point where he says, I want to kill him. And someone says, the Denzel Washington character says to him, if you win in the arena, you'll get your chance to kill him. And then he says that, but it's never really revisited that. I think there's maybe one moment later in the film where he said, you told me I'd get a chance, but it's in the background. It doesn't surprise me that you missed that at all. I mean, the inaccuracies, I kind of let some of that go. The first film was famous for designing itself off the base of the sarcophagi that exist in museums. So they got everything right. So the stuff at the beginning of the shields above and below was all designed from depictions of Rome. So they had historians on site. But the one big thing the first film got wrong, which was interesting because I think I'm right in saying this, that a lot of the historians really looked into it more because of Gladiator, the film. It kind of raised the whole profile of gladiators in Rome and what they were and who they were. And the result of that, in the research, academic research, changed our understanding of it. So they weren't really what they was portrayed in the first film, which is they were basically killed in front of everyone. You go to the arena and watch people being killed. That happened occasionally because it was high stakes fighting, but they didn't want gladiators being killed. They were the WWE wrestlers of the day, and some of them were famous. And the last thing these owners wanted was their Chris Cena, or whatever his name is, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. They didn't want them being killed off. And so there was a lot more staged fighting, and they think possibly even staged wounds and blood and stuff. And that was the reality of those gladiator rings. It was a shame that in Gladiator 2 they didn't adopt that and introduce that, because that would have been more historically accurate. But I kind of don't care a little bit about that. We write novels, right? And they're far-fetched, and that's the point of it. So I kind of, that's not the worst of it for me. The worst of it with Gladiator 2 comes when he gets to Rome. So he arrives in Rome, this guy. He wants to kill Acasius, but it starts to become obvious to us in the way that they link the flashbacks that this is Lucius. This is the little boy at the end of Gladiator. And first of all, I've got a problem with this. Not the biggest problem, I've got a problem with this. I've got a problem with the scene that they showed Lucilla as soon as Maximus has died in the arena. But remember, Commodus has died. And the whole of that film, or the last half of that film, is to save Lucius and to save Lucilla, Commodus has to go and bring justice back to Rome. Then they can live free and Rome can be just place again. And she gives a brilliant speech at the end. Is Rome worth one good man's life? Let it be so. And so that's happened. And then suddenly in the next film, we see her hurrying Lucius away to be smuggled away because he's not safe. Well, that doesn't make sense because he has just been made safe by the whole of the action in that film. And secondly, Maximus literally says, Lucius is safe.
He says those words, and we see this in the flashback. And then the next second, she's like hurrying, sending him off somewhere, never to see him again.
And I'm sorry, I don't buy it. And no mum is sending their son off, never to be seen again, hoping, fingers crossed, that they'll have a good life somewhere else. No mum ever does that. Not unless they're, got a gun to the head, or they've got a volcano about to erupt and they're going to go back and save somebody and save their son. But that situation wasn't there. So that was ridiculous. But this is the real bit that I just could not get my head around, is that, does he know he's Lucius or not? Because that is not clear until later in the film, when he sort of reveals that he does know he's Lucius, but he actually has a meeting with her. Lucilla comes into the cell and she says, "You're Lucius." And he says, I don't know that name. But I'm genuinely, having watched the film twice now, genuinely don't know whether he knew he was Lucius or not. But one of two things is the case. Either he knew he was Lucius all along, and that he kind of worked out Acacius is who he is, and he's his mother's partner, in which case he's remarkably relaxed about this, like not something he ever mentions or doesn't appear to be his motivation. When his mum comes in to see him, is kind of, "Oh yeah, who are you? Get out of here, I don't really want to speak to you," which is bloody weird. It's kind of your mother and you've gone back to Rome. Or he has no idea he's Lucius, in which case, at what point does he realise that? Because when she comes into the cell and tells him, there's no reaction at all. He barks at her, "I don't know who Lucius is," and barks at her to go.
There was literally no reaction on his face in what he says. I'm the same as you. I've watched it twice now, and I still couldn't tell whether he knew or not, because she comes in and says something, and he says, "If your son was here, I'm sure he'd tell you blah, blah, blah." And it's really not clear. Also, if he does know he's Lucius, why does he hate her? Because she sent him away to keep him safe. Assuming he hates her and that's valid, he then very quickly forgets that he hates her. And we go straight from him not wanting to speak to her to him treating her like his mother again. And it's just all complete. I'm a bit speechless because I don't understand how it got made.
Yeah, no, because you'd read that script and you'd say, him discovering who he is would completely confuse him, and then discovering that Maximus was his father, which, by the way, I think is completely realistic. We know that they had a past at the beginning. It always was in the back of my mind that maybe Maximus was actually the father of Lucius, and maybe Maximus didn't know that as well, because we definitely know they had a past. So I think I loved that aspect of it. So him discovering who he is, discovering that Maximus was his father, would throw him into exactly the sort of brilliant conflicted loyalty that we had in the first film, where Rome was both the baddie but also could be the good if it could be saved from itself. And that in the end, that the film, I guess, was about how we organise our society. You can either have it as a corrupt and greedy society, or you can have it as a just and fair society. But there was no moment where we had that. So yes, he transitioned from apparently not knowing who he was, or maybe he was just saying that, to knowing who he was and accepting that he was Maximus's father and putting on Maximus's shield. But there was never any moment on screen.
Yeah, and it felt like that should have been a bigger moment for us as well as the viewer, because like you said, we didn't know that Maximus was his father. Most of us who saw the first movie, like you said, it's not a surprise. It was kind of everybody sort of thought maybe, but it feels like that could have been a much bigger storyline and arc on its own, but they kind of complicated it with so many other characters and things. And like I need to talk about the emperors, the twin emperors, because they were just pantomime villains. Like with Commodus, it was Commodus in the first movie, wasn't it? And I don't want to keep comparing to the first one, but he was such a rich, in-depth villain, and you understood why he was so awful, because he was crippled by feeling inadequate, because he was crippled by the fact that his father preferred Maximus to him, and he had this weird love for his sister, and Maximus and her had a thing. So it was totally believable. Even if we're not comparing to the first movie, these twin emperors who are completely nuts, there's no depth to it. It really is like two-dimensional panto villain style. And if anything, they're just a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, they look like somebody with something about them would brush them away with the back of their hand. They'd be gone. Whereas Commodus was terrifying. had an iron grip on the army. He had Quintus backing him up all the time, who was like the leader of the Praetorian Guard. But these guys, it was amazing that anyone would think that they could possibly be in charge. I sort of understand that they were going for this kind of creepy, and Commodus had an element of that, right? That kind of bloodlust creepiness to him. But with all these other complexities, as you point out in his, but anyway, again, I think that's one of the smaller issues, because having some of the characters being a bit more one-dimensional, you could get away with as long as the rest is okay, but it wasn't. The rest was not okay. It was far from okay. So we've got Lucius apparently having this conversation with Mum. We don't know whether he thinks he's Lucius, knows he's Lucius or not. He wants to kill Acacius. So you hope there's going to be a big moment where he goes to kill Acacius, and there is this moment, but Acacius confronts him, tells him what he's already been told, and after that he doesn't want to kill Acacius anymore. So, it's like, okay, well, but you already knew that because Lucilla told you that, but you still wanted to kill Acacius, and now you're basically in the arena itself where they're pitted against each other. He's persuaded not to kill him because Maximus is his father and Lucilla is his mother, and that didn't make any sense. Now, I want to compare that with one scene, one moment from the first film to show how good the first film was. In the first film, when Maximus finally gets to see Commodus in the flesh, he's in the arena. And Commodus is up there in the stand. And during the fighting, you can see Maximus thinking, when can I kill this man? And is there going to be an occasion here? And at the end of it, Maximus obviously has to focus on other things and trying to save his own life. And we know from the way Maximus acts, he doesn't care about anything else but just killing Commodus. He wants to avenge his wife. There's constant flashbacks to his wife in heaven, or what's it called? The Elysium Fields. He needs to avenge his wife's death and his son's death, take Commodus's life, looking him in the eye, and then he's happy to go to Elysium. He doesn't care about his own life, which is wonderful. It's an amazingly strong character motivation. So then he's in the arena. Suddenly Commodus is there. The fight's suddenly over, and Commodus is on his way down to meet him. And this is an incredibly tense moment, because as a viewer, you think he's going to kill Commodus. He doesn't care about his own life in front of everyone. And he's looking down at the ground thinking, he's been told to drop all his weapons, but there was a little arrowhead, and he picks up this arrowhead, which is, in his hand, and you'll think, Christ, what's going to happen here? Is this all going to happen? And Commodus has no idea. He's brilliantly played by Joaquin Phoenix. He's walking along smugly to meet this guy who's got a full face mask on, so he doesn't know who he is. And then Lucius, the boy, runs out between them. And Maximus is thinking, I can't do it now. I now can't do it. He's also surrounded by the Praetorian Guard, makes it very risky that he would get a fatal blow in on Commodus. So he reluctantly drops the arrowhead. And this is not the time for him. But then the scene's not over. Then Commodus says, Spaniards, reveal yourself. And he doesn't want to reveal himself. And you're the audience thinking, he doesn't want to reveal himself. Once he's opened his mask up, everything changes. He's not sitting there silently waiting for his moment. He's flushed out. And then what will happen? But he turns his back on him and he walks away. And the audience knows exactly what's going on. They're with Maximus. They know the motivation of him. They know the motivation of Commodus. Lucilla's sitting up there, suddenly becoming intrigued by what's going on, because this looks like a challenge to power in front of everybody. He's turned his back on the emperor. Commodus has to say something. He says, how dare you turn your back on me? You will show your face. Maximus looks down and realizes he has to reveal himself. He has no choice now. He pulls the mask up, shows his face, and delivers one of the great iconic moments in cinema in my lifetime. I'm Maximus Decimus Meridius, father of a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Yeah.
Spine-chilling moment. And then Commodus wants to kill him, but can't kill him because the crowd are roaring. He's won the crowd over, and Commodus is trapped now with Maximus alive suddenly, and he realizes that people lied to him who were supposed to kill him. Now, all of that is a 2-minute scene in the middle of this film that perfectly illustrates the audience have every crystal clear, have clarity over everything, have clarity over everyone's motivation, what they're doing, and that meant that speech was all the more powerful. Gladiator 2 could not have been more confused or further from that. There was no opportunity. They gave a lot of these speeches, by the way. These speeches were written into them.
They did. There was a lot of speeches that were very clearly constructed to try to replicate what happened in Gladiator 1. But I think the real key thing is motivation. At no point was I clear what Lucius's motivation was. There were no stakes. There was no we knew with Maximus from the beginning, and because of how horrific it was as well, what happened to his family, it was different for Lucius. His wife died in battle. She was fighting. It was a very different situation. And, you know, Maximus's quest for revenge and that kind of like, this is all I need to do and then I'm happy to die, that was just so strong, and that was so clear from the beginning, and Lucius had none of it. Like, I could not tell you at any one point what his real true motivation was or describe him as a character. It was just, it fell completely flat, completely.
Yeah. And in the background, we have an internal struggle about Rome, which we had in the first film about Lucilla and, you know, getting together with Derek Jacobi and the other sort of senators to try and overthrow Commodus. And that's happening again. Again, there's another echo where they're just trying to replicate the first film, but without a lot of the story working around it. But we didn't really care. I didn't really feel invested in whether Rome got a new leader or not at this point. And they all seemed about the same. And so I think it was like 30 minutes to go before the end of the film when the brother was pitted against brother. And I thought, actually, that was potentially was a much better thing. But that was being done. The Denzel Washington, by the way, Denzel Washington, fantastic performance in this film, even though his character could probably be lifted out and not make much difference to the film. But he was one of my favourite actors. Denzel Washington is, I think, you know, always watch him and enjoy it. But it was 30 minutes before the end. It lasted 2 minutes when one brother was pitted against the other and he immediately killed him. So that was over. And then I think the whole, to finish off the film, they end up with the Praetorian Guard, which is like the closest guard around the emperor that sits in Rome, and the regimental army on the outskirts of the town. They're facing each other, and Lucius races out and he fights Denzel. But Denzel's character, I can't remember his name now, is another example of we're not really sure whether we're on his side or not. He sort of starts off okay and he turns out to be, I guess, a baddie. But it's not like we feel strongly about it. But Lucius does. So Lucius wants to go and kill him. So Lucius goes to kill him. The two armies are apparently pitted against each other. But literally, here's the thing. If you walked up to any soldier in the Praetorian Guard and say, why are you here? And why would you fight them? You walk up to any soldier in the regiment and say, why are you here? Why would you fight them? No one would have an answer. Because there was no motivation clear for anything. I don't know what the Praetorian Guard were protecting. The emperor's dead. Denzel's apparently going to be the new emperor and he's now dead. So who's fighting for what? That was as confused as the film became, and that was the last thing it did. So for me,
yeah, and then
it
they
was such a shame.
Mentioning Marcus Aurelius, didn't they? And that was another thing when we mentioned, did Lucius know who he was? Well, I think he must have done, because he was randomly quoting poetry and speeches and things that his grandfather had taught him.
Exactly. You're right.
Too young to remember any of that, and then that came up at the end, and they kept sort of harping back to that as if all these people are still remembering that, and that just added to the confusion. It wasn't clear who anyone was fighting for or what they were trying to achieve at the end. And even his very long speech at the end, I didn't really know what he was trying. Who was he talking to?
No.
What was he trying to get him to do? I don't know.
I'd love one of the soldiers on horseback to lean over to literally who's he going on about.
Who is this guy?
If he did know he was Lucius, right, I think it would have been better at the beginning when his wife's killed. I think it would be better at the beginning before his wife's killed for him to establish that he can never go to Rome. That place is dead to him. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And she knows there's reasons, but she doesn't understand why. But we start to understand he feels bitter and angry the way his mother abandoned him. And he remembers his grandfather fondly, but he wants nothing to do with that place or those people. Then when his wife's killed by this general, he realizes he has to go there, but for only one person. Start to make it all stronger. But make Acacius a nasty, unpleasant face of that dictatorial Rome, not the wife of Lucilla. That just confused things. And I didn't know who
maybe
to root
they were
for.
trying to get away from Commodus. Maybe they were trying not to just have the same dynamic again by making Lucilla's partner like a real villain. But they've tried to copy everything else. They've tried to manufacture the same feeling with all the rest of the movie. So why not just do that again? And I think that her motivation, going right back to her abandoning Lucius, like that's a core issue with the film before you've even got to the beginning of it, because she would go with him. There's no way that she would just have sent him off. So his motivation of hating his mother, not going back to Rome, would have made the movie stronger, but it still doesn't really make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't explain why she would have done that, which she wouldn't have done. But anyway, she paid for it with her life. She died along the way, so spoiler alert.
She did, and I didn't feel anything by that point of the movie.
No,
I was just
even forgotten
I was literally looking at my watch going, oh my God, how much longer have I got to stay up and watch this? Because I just didn't care.
Here's a question for Tom Donnelly, who will be listening to this somewhere. How can a film that costs $200 million plus, I haven't looked up the budget, but it would have been expensive. How can a film that costs that much money and require that many people to work on it physically and require that amount of investment from a studio and studio time and After Effects and everything else be made with a script that patently doesn't work? Is that because Ridley Scott is now so powerful?
Was it literally just, we don't really care because we just want people to go see it?
If I thought that conversation had taken place, I'd be surprised. But it's possible that they read the script and thought, the script doesn't really work, but we've got the spectacle, so that will carry the film. Maybe that conversation took place. Or is it like George Lucas with the prequels, where it was a bad script, but nobody felt they could say that to him? I wonder if that was the case with Ridley Scott.
It wasn't the same writer, though, was it? It wasn't the same writer, I don't think. Let me look it up.
No. It was written by
because otherwise, why not say something? Who wrote? I should have looked this up before. Script. Come on, Google. Yeah, it wasn't the same person. So one of my favourite authors, William Nicholson, wrote the first script, or was main script writer on the first one. And so it wasn't the same person. I don't know why they wouldn't have just said, this is shit. It doesn't work.
Yeah, needs a rewrite. It felt like a first draft. It had
a hard job.
It had ideas in it, and I love the setup that Lucius. I mean, I love the setup that Lucius has gone. I think they could have come up with a better one. Like he could have been kidnapped, or he could have gone missing when he went out with the army the first time, and that he never came back, and she's distraught all these years. That has a much better reason for Lucius not being missing.
Yes,
maybe he had a head injury or something. They didn't realize who he was, but then we needed a better reason for Lucius not being there. But I like the fact that he's off in the wilderness and coming back to Rome. But there needed to be absolute clarity. Does he know who he is? That's one way of telling the story. Or he doesn't know who he is and he finds out, which is an even better way, I think. I think of him having this vague idea. And when someone says to him, when Lucilla says to him, "You're my son," Vader moment, I'm your father. He reacts badly against it, but a bit like Luke in the second Star Wars film, knows there's something there that resonates with him, that makes sense, and that it makes it even worse for him. So he's come to kill the people he hates, and he is one of them. He's like one of the top ones. He's the natural heir throne. I mean, that's a bloody brilliant way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
So there's some good ideas.
Yeah, I think if they'd focused on his parentage, and if that had been the core driving force and the complexities that are wrapped up in that, that would have made such a stronger script and storyline, and all the other stuff could have still happened, but it just would have made the emotion happen. Because I think if you think about the feeling you're left with at the end of it, it's kind of like, it felt very weird. I felt like I'd watched a version of Gladiator 1 because it had the soundtrack and it had the aesthetics and it was filmed in a similar way. Even in Gladiator 1, they had those flashes to the wife in the afterlife. They even tried to do that here. They had this weird, grayed out sequence where he saw his wife going off in a boat with the Grim Reaper or whoever he was. So it was trying to manufacture that feeling, but they could have done without all that and actually just made the script better. And then we would have got that feeling, because we would have left feeling emotional the way we did in Gladiator 1. It seems like somebody just missed it somewhere along the way. It's like somebody didn't understand. And that's why I don't understand how it got through to this point of being made and so much money being spent on it, because somebody didn't get what we're responding to. And what we responded to in the first movie wasn't all the spectacle, which was awesome. Like that, the fight sequences and all of that stuff in the first movie was great, but it was the characters and it was the emotion. They just seemed to, nobody sat down and dissected, why is the first film so good? And let's try and replicate that instead of just, what key elements of this plot could we use?
It was odd. Okay. Well, look, what do people think then?
So we didn't have that many comments, actually. We had, very much the same. My sister, I was talking to her about it this morning, and she just said stupid, the lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Some day, it was a lot quicker. We take 40 minutes to say that.
The characters were just awful. It all felt completely pointless. Who was the bad guy? His character was shit. We were just talking about it a lot. And we both said, as much as we love Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal, they didn't carry it enough, unfortunately. They're amazing. They're both amazing actors, but their material was not good enough. And then, isn't there a line in the first Gladiator movie where he says, "Were you not entertained?"
Oh,
yes. Well, somebody in the Discord
throws a sword onto the table.
Yeah, somebody in the Discord put, "I was mildly entertained."
Oh, damned with
Were
faint
you not
praise.
mildly entertained? Let me just check Patreon. I mean, it was basically all very much the same. Somebody in the Discord, I think it was Ken, was saying the same thing about Acacius and Lucius's dynamic, and that it just wasn't a strong enough motivation for him. So I didn't see anybody saying, "Hey, you guys are being too harsh. We love it."
No, okay. So it cost $310 million to make.
How much?
$310 million to make.
Okay. Did they make that money back? Does anybody know?
Let's have a look at Gladiator 2 budget versus budget and box office.
I'm just looking at comments on the post.
Yeah, it did make it back. It made 460.5 million. Oh no, hang on, 460 million. 460 million it made. So it should have made its money back. And that doesn't surprise me. And it really did sit on the coattails of the first film. So we went to see it. Of course, everyone, one of the great films of all time, that made another one, would go and see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly don't think my criticism is because I love the first film so much and I'm disappointed it didn't live up to it. It's not the case of that. That might be the case in some of the more recent Star Wars films. I think they're good films and they tell a good story, but they just not quite captured that romance of the first ones. This was just a poor film that didn't work. Which was
and I did try all the way through I did try to keep distancing myself from the first one. I know we've made a lot of comparisons when we've been talking about it, but I did try to keep thinking about, well, if I hadn't seen the first one, what would I think of this one? And I would think it was just a standard kind of action movie with no real plot to it. But it was impossible not to think about the first one because they wanted you to.
Yeah.
And I think actually the most telling thing about people's comments is that most people of the homework that we gave them, which was Gladiator 2 and Slow Horses, most people said they watched Slow Horses and didn't get round to Gladiator 2. So I think it was just people going, you know what, we've heard things about that, don't really want to watch it.
Okay, well, let's do Slow Horses. It's going to be a lot quicker. So Slow Horses is an adaptation of a Mick Herron novel. I've just started reading the series. I've read book 5, which I absolutely loved, which is going to be season 5, and they've done 4 seasons. That's on Apple TV. Set around a fictionalized version of MI5. So MI5 is like the CIA but internal. Our secret services or intelligence services are broken into 3 in the UK. So in America you have the CIA, which does everything home and abroad. In the UK we have MI5, which is intelligence services that operate about internal terrorism and stuff like that. MI6, which does global terrorism, and GCHQ, which is like listening posts. So it's a fictionalized version of MI5, where you have this outpost, which is a dreary, above a takeaway restaurant in London, place where people who failed in their job but can't be sacked get sent to a kind of Siberia version of it. It's called Slough House. And my takeaway, so let's try and deal with this quickly. There's only 40 minutes on Gladiator 2. My takeaway from Slow Horses, I actually don't think, if you really look at it, I don't know if the story in the first book and the first TV series is fantastic. I think it's okay. It's an internal kidnap plot, kind of Islamic terrorism plot it starts off with. And it gets confused because it starts to turn out like there may have been some MI5 agency to this kidnap plot, which is going to be very embarrassing for MI5. And Slow Horses, the Slow Horses are their nickname, the people in Slough House, work this out before MI5, the rest of MI5 does, and they're the ones who end up basically saving the day, which is a bit of a pattern in the books. I think the story is okay, but reason you can't take your eyes off this is because of character. And I think it's a good example. If you get the characters absolutely scintillating, if you get the characters addictive and you want to read and hear their next line, the story has its rightful place, but it's not. It's that line we've quoted from Sharon Horgan several times. People remember the characters long after they've forgotten the story. And it's a kind of reminder to us that you should probably really start with characters. So the main character in this is Lamb, who is played by Gary Oldman. He's the guy who runs Slough House. He's obnoxious. He's smelly. He's incredibly unhealthy. He's incredibly rude, un-PC. I mean, in book 5, the lines he uses against a woman who has no legs and is in a wheelchair in the records office in Regency Park, which is the main MI5 bird, is eye-watering. I mean, it was 10 years ago, but even so. But you love him for it because he's this genius and he's seen it. And he's also does, despite everything he says, he cares about his team that he runs. I think
incredibly loyal, and he will, even if it seems like he's not, every time you think he's going to let them down, he doesn't, and he comes through every time. And it was a while ago actually that I watched season 1, so I don't remember the plot, couldn't tell you what the plot was at all. I couldn't tell you what the story was, but I remember the characters, and that's the thing. And I think that's the case with a lot of really good thrillers, really good detective shows, all that kind of thing. It was the characters that made me binge the whole 4 seasons all in one. And I think River is a really interesting one, actually. And I thought that it was going to be one of those classic kind of focusing on his romantic relationships, because they were sort of positioning him as maybe the secondary lead. He's the one who, right at the beginning of the first episode, we see him cocking up a mission, and it was actually a training exercise, and that's what gets him put into Slough House. But I love that as the series progresses and we go into season 2, season 3, season 4, it's actually his relationship, his friendships, and his relationship with his grandfather that is the main driving force. And I thought that was just so refreshing, because in most TV shows, and there are romances that go on, but in most TV shows there'll be some sort of will they won't they romantic relationship that drags you through. And it just shows that it doesn't have to be that, because River's relationship with his grandfather is for me one of the biggest reasons to watch, because it's just the way it evolves and the way things change. I loved it.
Yeah. So, and I think what's interesting about River is that he's the nearest thing to normality in that office. So he's kind of a normal guy. He's quite neat. He's quite good looking. Jack Loudon plays him, and he's a good looking, neat guy. He looks like an MI5 agent who's weirdly stuck in Slough House. And it turns out in book 1, it's because there's a nasty rival of his and made sure that he failed as you say, this training exercise that got him stuck there. But the other characters in there all have very, very deep and obvious flaws. So you could write down a list of their character traits and they'd be all very distinctly different. So Catherine Standish, even, who's like the secretary to Gary Oldman's character, to Lamb, she has her own traits. There's a guy downstairs who is the IT guy and does all the whizzy stuff to trace people. He's egomaniac, absolutely obnoxious, almost impossible to have a conversation with. You have a coke addict in there who's introduced, I think, in the next book. There's also a guy who's deeply traumatized, who's introduced in book 3. So they all all the characters are so very different. And Jack Loudon's character, River, can't remember his surname now. Cartwright. River Cartwright. He's like this normal guy in the middle of it who's constantly thinking, I just need to quit this and become a car salesman. And he also, I love about his character that Mick Herron writes him, he looks like this perfect guy, like he'd slot into a James Bond film, but he gets stuff wrong quite often, or he sort of gets it right, but he gets little bits wrong, and he's always like fine, okay, he sort of knows his place. And so he doesn't make him perfect either. So it's we'll wrap this up because it's been a long episode, but the takeaway for me is as I say, is you get those characters right and you're laughing as an author if you can write characters. I think I have not been anything like good enough in my writing to write good characters, and the more I watch these stuff, the more I think about it and critically and read Mick Herron, the more I realise I need to do a lot more work on character before I even start the story, and not focus the whole time on story, which is probably what I've been doing so far. So that might,
like every single one of the characters in Slow Horses you know what their motivations are. You know what their backstory is. They are so three-dimensional. Even the bit characters, even I think in series 4, there's a woman who shows up to replace Catherine as the secretary. Even her, who's not in it for very long. Yes. Even the traumatized guy who doesn't really speak, like every single one is still made really, really engaging, and you want to know more. And what's driving you through it is wanting to know more about these characters. So it's just, I think the reason we don't have as much to say about it is because it kind of feels obvious compared to Gladiator. And the comments that we had on Slow Horses were people saying they're just relatable. They're relatable characters. We can all identify with parts of each person in this TV show, and we're kind of rooting for them all, even though they're all fuck ups. We're like, we want them to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Well, I think that I will read books. There's a brilliant, if you are watching the series, there's a very, very exciting line in like the last paragraph of book 5, which is the end of the next season. Very exciting line, just a little hint about something. You think, oh my God. So I can't wait to read book 6 after I've finished T.D. Donnelly's Year of the Rabbit, which, by the way, is a great example of, he was worried about me reading Mick Herron and then reading him. You can't compare me to Mick Herron. But I can compare him to Mick Herron because I think he does the character thing in the same way. He's got these same, it's not larger than life character. I'm not quite sure what that expression means, but very, very focused in your mind. What they are, what their motivation is, what their flaws are, is crystal clear to me in Tom's book in the first few paragraphs and first couple of chapters. And that's the same with Slow Horses. So I think there's a lot to learn from somebody who's been trying to flog stories to Hollywood for 30 years, probably knows what they're talking about. It's been the Tom Donnelly show this week, and so we won't mention him in every sentence from now on.
I'm starting to feel a little bit self-conscious here. Can we...
We'll have him back on at some point so you can meet him.
Thank you.
Right, that's it. Thank you very much indeed, Cara Claire. We have, this will go out a month before SPS Live. Last few tickets are on sale, so if you want to come and join us and come and say hello, we will plant ourselves probably in that pub on the Tuesday evening. Is it the Mad Hatter?
Yeah.
We'll plant ourselves in the Mad Hatter.
We've got the speaker's dinner as well, but maybe before that or after that.
Yes, we'll find a way. It'll probably be after that, won't it? And then on Wednesday night, I think at the moment I've kept Wednesday night free. So Wednesday night is between the two days. Not everyone's going to the second day. It's limited at 200. That sold out a long time ago. So the second day is the workshop day. But Wednesday night, maybe we can do something as well.
I'm also free on Wednesday night. So if anybody wants to invite me out somewhere, it's my birthday around that time. Taking applications.
Blimey. Everyone bring a present, otherwise she's hell to live with. All right,
so true.
Thank you very much.
All right, see you soon.
Bye.
Support the podcast and get exclusive access by joining our Patreon. From just $1 an episode, you'll be invited to our Discord server, where the weekly discussion continues every day. And our 2 top tiers include a monthly live Q&A with James and Cara. Head to indiewritersclub.com/support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. We'll see you next Friday.
The Indie Writers Club podcast is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid. Built by writers for writers, Pro Writing Aid doesn't just check spelling and grammar. It helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. Now it can even provide on-demand developmental feedback on your entire manuscript with its manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Give your writing a competitive advantage by heading to prowritingaid.com. You can also sign up for free or use the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.